The wedding was in full swing when suddenly the doors barged open and the bride, Ose, stumbled into the church wearing a black dress, reeking of alcohol. All the guests couldn't help but whisper and ask themselves why she was dressed in black. A bride in a black dress was something that they had never seen before. Osai stood at the altar, his face twisted in confusion and heartbreak as he watched Ose stumble towards him. "What are you doing? Why are you dressed like this? Why are you drunk?" he asked Ose, who looked him right in the eyes and said that the ceremony was a joke. "You, me, this entire wedding is all a joke." Everyone opened their eyes in shock as they wondered what she was talking about. Osayi moved closer, gently, his face filled with pain as he pleaded for her not to do this to him. "We can talk," he said repeatedly as the room fell into an uncomfortable silence. "Our entire wedding and life are a complete joke. Why bother getting married when we know that it's a joke?" she said to Osayi, who looked at her broken to hear this from the woman that he loved. Her best friend Teka, on seeing all that was happening, called her aside to speak to her. After what felt like forever, Ose decided to go on with the wedding, insisting on dressing in her black dress. The entire atmosphere was stripped of its happiness as the pastor conducted the wedding ceremony amidst the drama that happened earlier. Osayi, though deeply hurt and confused, tried to maintain his composure. He loved Ose so much and couldn't stand losing her, despite knowing that his feelings for her might never be reciprocated. Ose had told him countless times that she never loved him. She made it clear time and again that her heart was not truly in the marriage. Yet, Osayi had clung on to the hope that love would somehow grow between them. All Ose wanted was to have children who she would love with all of her heart. However, following the societal stigmatization of single motherhood, Ose decided to get married so as to enable her make babies that she would shower with all of her love. For Ose, the wedding wasn't about love, it was about survival, about fulfilling expectations and avoiding the shame that came with defying cultural norms. Marriage was a means to an end, and Osayi, despite his genuine love for her, was merely the key to that life she envisioned for herself. As the ceremony continued, Ose stood at the altar, feeling detached from the words being spoken. The pastor's voice seemed distant, and the vows felt like a ritual that she was simply enduring. Her eyes wandered over the guests, many of whom had concerned or judgmental expressions on their faces. She knew what they were thinking. Why is Ose ruining this day? But none of them knew the burden she carried, the pressure of societal expectations, and the deep loneliness she had felt for years. When the time came for the vows, Ose's hands trembled slightly. She stared at Osayi, who looked at her with love and desperation, hoping this moment would somehow change things. The pastor asked her the customary question, and the room fell into a tense silence. "Do you, Ose, take Osayi to be your lawfully wedded husband, to love and to cherish, in sickness and in health, for as long as you both shall live?" Ose hesitated. The words, "to love and to cherish," echoed in her mind, mocking her. She didn't love him, and she knew she never would, but the weight of societal expectations pressed down on her chest. The thought of bringing shame to herself was unbearable. "I do," she whispered, her voice barely audible. The guest exhaled in relief, and Osayi smiled weakly, though there was a deep sadness in his eyes. He knew deep down that this wasn't how love was supposed to feel, but he had been blinded by his hope that marriage could change things, that perhaps, over time, Ose's feelings for him would grow. The ceremony dragged on, and when it was finally time to kiss the bride, Ose turned her face slightly, allowing Osayi to place a quick kiss on her cheek instead of her lips. All the guests could not help but notice the obvious disconnection between the couple, who stood awkwardly at the altar, their union feeling more like a formal arrangement than a celebration of love. The first kiss and the sadness in Osayi's eyes spoke volumes about the fragile foundation of their marriage. Whispers and murmurs spread through the room as guests exchanged uncomfortable glances. unsure of how to react to what they had just seen. Once the ceremony was over, Ose and her husband Osayi returned to their new home, like people who were mourning the loss of another. Osayi glanced at Ose, hoping for some kind of connection, some spark that might reassure him that they could make things work. But Ose ignored him and walked straight to their bedroom. She laid on the bed like a log of wood, ready to fulfill her marital responsibilities. No atom of emotion or affection in sight. After all she wants are children who she would shower with all of her love. The idea of raising children was the only thing that had driven her to go through with the wedding in the first place. Ose felt no atom of love for her husband, and although she could see the effort he was putting to earn her love, she just couldn't bring herself to love him. Osayi could not help but feel the emptiness between them. He watched as Ose lay on the bed, distant and detached, her coldness seeping into every corner of their home. His heart ached with the realization that no matter how much he tried, no matter how much love he poured into their marriage, he could never bridge the gap between them. Ose had made it clear time and again that her heart wasn't in this marriage, and now he was forced to confront the painful truth. He sat on the edge of the bed, his head in his hands, trying to make sense of it all. Ose, he whispered, "We don't have to do this tonight. We don't have to force anything. I just want us to be okay." Ose turned her head abruptly to look at him, her eyes bloodshot from the alcohol that she had taken earlier. "What use are you to me if not to make babies? You wanted a wife and now you have one. I want babies, so let's get this over with," Ose said coldly, her words filled with so much bitterness. Osayi stared at her, his chest tightening with sorrow and frustration. He had always known that Ose didn't love him, but to hear her say it so bluntly, to treat their marriage as nothing more than a transactional arrangement, was more painful than anything he had imagined. "You deserve better than this, and so do I," Osayi said to Ose, revealing that although he so desperately wants to be a father, he was not going to do it like this. Ose, in that moment, fumed in anger to hear this. "Are you saying that you won't perform your duties to me?" she asked Osayi, who was short of words. "If this is the case, then permit me to sleep with any man of my choice to make babies, but be rest assured that you will father my children whether you like it or not. So, you have to choose between performing your duties or fathering another man's child," Ose said to Osayi, who knew better than to call her bluff. He accepted to perform his duties, but instead of finding pleasure in it, it felt like a chore to him, as Ose lay there emotionless, like a lifeless object whose spirit had departed from her body. Once they were done, Ose turned to her side of the bed and slept off, leaving Osayi bewildered by all that had happened. This was the longest night Osayi had ever had. He felt like giving up, but the love he had for Ose made it difficult to live, as Osayi could not imagine a life without her. After hours of thinking, Osayi went to bed exhausted and hungry. He had a meeting the next morning and had to be up early. However, few hours into his sleep, Osayi felt some cold water being splashed on his body. He opened his eyes, startled, to see his wife Ose standing over him with an empty bucket in her hand. Her face could not hide the anger that was looming inside of her. Osayi wiped the water from his face, his mind racing with confusion and shock. "Ose, what is it?" he asked, his voice trembling with a mixture of hurt and disbelief. Ose, with a frown on her face, yelled angrily at him, calling him a grunting pig. "Why are you snoring like a grunting pig?" she said to Osayi, who never knew that he snored. "I can't be sleeping next to a pig at night, so pack up your things and go look for somewhere else to sleep," Ose said to Osayi, who stood there in disbelief, drenched in cold water and trying to make sense of the situation. His heart sank as he realized just how much Ose resented him. He left the bedroom to the living room to sleep, knowing that he had an early start the next morning. When morning came, Osayi woke up to realize that he was already late. Without wasting much time, he rushed off to work, forgetting some vital documents he needed for the presentation he had that morning. By the time he realized that he left the document, it was already an hour to his presentation. Osayi quickly rushed home to realize that the house doors were locked and Ose was nowhere to be found. In a state of panic, Osai called Ose repeatedly on the phone, but Ose refused to pick his calls. Tension filled the atmosphere as Osai dropped several messages on her phone, narrating how urgent it was for her to return, but Ose read the messages and ignored them. A few minutes passed, and Osai did not know what to do. He called up her friend Teka, who informed him that Ose was in the nearby salon fixing her nails. Osai was so livid as he rushed off to the salon and met Ose, laughing and chatting with the nail technician. Without wasting any time, Osai grabbed the keys and rushed home to pick the documents. He had only a few minutes left before his presentation and rushed back to the office, just in time to make his presentation. However, hours after his successful presentation, Osai returned home to meet his wife, who acted as though nothing had happened. He sat in the living room, fed up of all that had been happening. He loved Ose so much, but did not know how long he would have to put up with her indifference towards their marriage. Ose, we need to talk, he said, looking right at her as she scrolled through her phone, looking so uninterested in anything he had to say. The tension in the air was thick, and the silence between them spoke louder than words. Osai took a deep breath and began speaking, even though she paid no attention to him. This isn't working. I've tried. I've given you everything, but it's clear you don't want this marriage, Osai said, hoping that she tells him otherwise. But Ose, without any atom of emotion, replied him saying that all she cares about was having children. Give me babies, that's all I ask for. You can do whatever you want to do with your life. I am not stopping you. All I need are children, and for you to stand as a father figure to them. Any other thing I am not interested, Ose said as she continued to scroll through her phone, not caring how her words pierced Osai's heart. Is that all you see me as, Ose? A means to an end? Osai asked, his voice breaking with a mix of sorrow and frustration. He had hoped for a spark of emotion, even if it was anger or pain, but Ose remained unbothered, her eyes glued to the phone in her hands. You knew from the beginning, Osai, she replied calmly, never lifting her gaze from the screen. I never wanted love or companionship. All I wanted was children, nothing more. You're the one who chose to believe in a fairy tale. Osai sat there in silence, absorbing her words. He had known from the beginning that Ose was reluctant, but he had convinced himself that love could change things, that over time she could see the goodness in him and reciprocate his feelings. Now he saw the stark reality of the situation. Ose didn't care, and she never would. I can't do this anymore, Ose, he said quietly, his voice steady. I love you, but I can't keep pretending that this is a marriage. I deserve more than just being a father figure in a loveless home. Ose finally looked up, her expression blank. Then leave, she said angrily. If you can't handle it, leave. Her words hung in the air like a heavy cloud, and for a moment, Osai felt a sharp pang of despair. The woman he had loved was gone, as all that remained was this cold, indifferent person who saw him only as a vessel for her desires. I'll leave then, Osai said, standing up angrily as he snatched his car keys from the table. Just as he was about leaving the door, he heard Ose scream out in pain, holding her stomach tightly. Osai froze at the sound of Ose's scream. He turned around and saw her doubled over, clutching her stomach, her face contorted with pain. His initial reaction was confusion. He wasn't sure if she was faking it or if it was another one of her cold manipulations, but the pain in her eyes was real, and instinctively, his concern took over. Ose, he shouted, rushing back to her side. What's wrong? Ose's face was pale, and her body shook as she struggled to speak. My stomach, she said as she continued to wince in pain. Osai in that moment rushed her to the hospital, and the doctors, on examining her, revealed that she was 6 weeks pregnant, but that her pregnancy was high risk because of the heavy drinking and overall stress. The doctor explained that Ose's condition was fragile and that she had to remain in the hospital all through her pregnancy for close observation, as not doing so might lead to a miscarriage or worse still, complications that could endanger her own life. Osai stood there, his mind spinning with disbelief. Pregnant? They had been intimate, but the idea of Ose carrying his child, despite all the issues between them, felt like a shock. Ose lay in the hospital bed silent, staring at the ceiling. She barely reacted to the news, her face straight as usual. The doctor left them alone, and the silence between them grew heavy once again. Osai sat beside her, unsure of what to say. He had always wanted to be a father, but this, a child born into a loveless marriage from a woman who resented him, he knew this wasn't the family he had dreamed of. Ose, did you know you were pregnant? He asked gently, breaking the silence. She nodded, still not meeting his eyes. Yes, that's why I've been insisting on having children. Her words cut deep. Osayi realized that even now, the baby wasn't a symbol of love or unity between them. To her, it was just another part of the plan. Ose, you need to take care of yourself, he said softly, knowing his words might fall on deaf ears. This is our child. I want you to be healthy for him. Ose finally turned to look at him, her eyes devoid of emotion. I don't care, Osayi. I just want the baby. I'll do whatever it takes to have them. But you and I, this doesn't change anything. The weight of her indifference crushed him. Osayi had hoped just for a moment that the pregnancy would soften Ose, that maybe the idea of a child would make her open up to him, or at least care about something beyond herself. But she remained unmoved. For days, Ose stayed in the hospital, and Osayi visited her daily, bringing her meals, flowers, anything he thought might brighten her mood. But nothing worked. One afternoon, when Osayi arrived at the hospital, he met Teka, who could see the sadness in his eyes. She knew how much Osayi loved his wife Ose, but could not understand why Ose had refused to open up her heart for him. Teka sat beside Osayi in the hospital waiting room, her heart aching for him. She had been friends with Ose for years, and though she loved Ose like a sister, she was opposed to what she was doing to Osayi. The coldness, the indifference, it was driving Osayi to the brink of despair. Osayi was a man that every woman would dream of. Handsome, caring, and responsible. A man that every woman would pray to have. And Ose has refused to see the good in him. Osayi did everything possible to hold back his tears. Teka, he said, his voice filled with so much pain. I don't know what else to do. She doesn't care. Even with the baby, she's still so distant. What am I supposed to do? He asked Teka, who suggested that they go have a drink together. Teka's heart clenched for Osayi, knowing how good he was towards her friend, despite not being loved in return. They spent hours talking and chatting in the bar, as Osayi poured out his heart to her. Her heart ached to see Osayi in so much pain. The next morning, Teka paid a visit to Ose in the hospital to talk to her about her husband. Ose did not seem interested in whatever her friend had to say, and this angered Teka, who busted out in anger and asked Ose why she had to be so heartless. This man loves you, but all you have ever done to him is break his spirit. Why are you so heartless? She asked Ose, who said to her that she doesn't care if Osayi was broken or not. All I want from him is a child, and now I am pregnant. He can do whatever he wants. You can't eat your cake and have it, Ose. How will you use a man to actualize your selfish plan, not caring how this is affecting him? Osayi needs love in his life too, and you have refused to give him what he wants. Teka's words struck a nerve as Ose looked her in the eyes and made a comment that Teka never saw coming. If you pity him so much, why don't you give him the love that I have failed to give him, since you are so concerned? Ose said, her voice dripping with sarcasm and bitterness. Teka's mouth opened in shock, stunned by Ose's cruel suggestion. She had always defended Ose, hoping that one day her friend would open her heart to Osayi. But now, it seemed Ose had truly lost all sense of compassion. Teka took a deep breath, trying to steady her emotions. Ose, I came here as your friend, trying to help you see what you're losing. Osayi doesn't deserve this, and deep down, you know that. You may not care about him now, but you will regret this someday when you finally lose him. With this, Teka left the hospital ward, disappointed in her friend. She met up with Osayi, who was waiting patiently in the hospital reception, his face filled with worry as he saw her approaching. What did she say? He asked Teka, his voice barely filled with life. Teka hesitated, choosing her words carefully as she spoke. Osayi, I won't sugarcoat this. Ose, she's in a very dark place. She's so focused on what she wants that she has refused to see what she's losing. She told me something cruel, something I didn't expect from her. Osayi's heart sank, bracing himself for what Teka was about to say. She said that if I care so much about you, I should give you the love that she has refused to give to you. She's pushing us together, Osayi, and doesn't care if she loses you at all. Osayi blinked in disbelief. the weight of Teka's words settling in slowly. I can't believe she would say that, Osayi said, shaking his head in shock. I've given her everything, and yet it's like she's determined to push me away. Tears poured down his eyes as Teka leaned in to comfort him. It will be okay, Osayi, she said as she hugged and comforted him. In the coming weeks, Teka ensured to check on Osayi often as they began to spend more time together. She visited his home to clean for him and even prepared his favorite meals. Osayi found himself leaning more on Teka for emotional support. He appreciated her kindness and they spent more time together, sharing conversations that brought him a small sense of relief from the storm raging inside his life. Teka, despite her own frustrations with Ose, remained a constant presence in Osayi's life, offering him warmth and understanding that he hadn't experienced in a very long time. Osayi continued to visit Ose in the hospital, though their interactions remained distant and cold. Teka, however, kept her distance, unsure of how to face Ose after her confrontation the other day. One evening, Ose received a text from her sister, who she had not spoken to in a very long time. It was a picture of her best friend Teka and Osayi holding hands and walking into a supermarket together.